Think you can just walk away? I'll ruin you." Derek's voice thundered as he burst into the dining room. I sat frozen at the table, my fingers clenching the edges of my breakfast plate. To anyone else, this mansion screamed of wealth and success, pristine marble floors, walls adorned with priceless art. But to me, it was a cage I couldn't escape. To the outside world, I lived in luxury. Inside, I was a butterfly with clipped wings. His words echoed in the spacious room, but I had to stand my ground. "You can't control me forever, Derek." "Oh, you think so?" He leaned in, his face inches from mine. His eyes were cold and calculating. "What makes you think you can survive without me?" His words were a chilling reminder of how deeply I was trapped. Each day was a struggle to maintain composure, knowing full well that Derek's manipulative grip on my life was tightening. We had once been in love, or at least I thought we were. But those days were long gone, replaced by a harsh reality. Derek's anger flared over the littlest things. A misplaced document, a social mishap. Everything was met with his fiery temper. "You think anyone else will take you? You're nothing without me." My heart ached every time he belittled me, yet I found strength in the resolve building inside. My silence was no longer a sign of surrender but a tactic for survival. Still, in moments like these, standing up to him felt like a small but significant victory. He knocked the back of the chair, sending it tumbling to the floor. I didn't flinch, outwardly playing the part of the composed wife. Inside, adrenaline coursed through my veins. "I have connections, you know," he continued, voice low but threatening. "One word from me and you're finished." I took a deep breath, shaking a little. "There was once a time you spoke kindly, Derek. What happened?" "Life happened, Emma," he spat. "You wanted this life, remember?" Once upon a time, I believed in the dream he sold me, a vision of love and prosperity, where my ambitions as a small-town girl from Ohio could flourish in the big city. But over time, his charismatic mask slipped, revealing the domineering tyrant beneath. I stood up, my chair sliding back with a loud scrape. "I wanted a partnership, not a prison." Derek chuckled darkly. "Prison? Is that what you call this? Some would kill for your lifestyle." I picked up the fallen chair, setting it back in place. "What good is luxury if you're miserable?" His chuckles stopped, replaced by a cold, silent stare. "Remember, Emma, you're nothing without me." With that, he stormed out of the room, leaving me to collect the shattered pieces of my composure. I looked around the room, etched in marble and gold, yet devoid of warmth. The walls seemed to close in around me, reminding me daily of the life I once dreamed of, now turned nightmare. I drew in a deep breath, thinking momentarily about the days that brought me here. Days filled with hope and ambition, now lost to Derek's control. If only I had listened to my parents. They warned me about the dangers of big city charm masking ruthless intent. Dreams of success led me here, but it was the nightmares that kept me. Now I had to find a way out. I needed a plan, allies, and most of all, the courage to take my life back. This was only the beginning of my stand against Derek, and I vowed I wouldn't back down. As the door slammed shut, I whispered to myself, "This ends now." Moving from Ohio to Chicago was supposed to be my big break. I remember the day I told my parents. My mom, Martha, had her doubts. "The city's no place for a girl like you, Emma. You have everything you need right here." "But Mom," I argued, "there's so much more out there. Opportunities, adventures." Dad gave me a silent nod, a man of few words but filled with the quiet strength that always pushed me forward. "If it's what you want, go for it." The city was as daunting as it was exciting. I juggled 2 part-time jobs while trying to squeeze into the fast-paced world of business and networking. Long shifts and sleepless nights became my routine. I seemed out of place at first, a small-town girl learning to run with the big dogs. Every day felt like a test. But I pressed on, determined to make my mark. Then I met Derek. It was at an upscale networking event, held in one of those swanky hotels where the chandeliers almost outshine the stars outside. I was a bundle of nerves, trying to play the part of the polished businesswoman. Derek approached me with a charm that felt like pure warmth in the cold, glittering crowd. "You look like you could use a drink," he said, handing me a glass of champagne. "First time?" I smiled nervously, taking the flute. "Is it that obvious?" He laughed, a sound that would later haunt me. "A bit, but you've got the passion. I can see it." Our conversations were endless, his words painting vivid pictures of success and partnership. The more he talked, the more I felt seen and understood. For the first time, I felt like I belonged. Derek was a self-made man, or so he claimed, who understood the struggles and triumphs. "Come, let me show you the city," he urged one night after dinner, the lights of Chicago glittering around us. "I want you to see what's possible." Serenades beneath the skyline, gifts, and promises filled the whirlwind romance that followed. I was dizzy with the rush of it all. A small-town girl flung into a bustling metropolis, swept off her feet by a man with seemingly endless resources. One evening, after an exquisite dinner at a five-star restaurant, Derek took my hand, his eyes gleaming with determination. "Marry me, Emma. Let's conquer the world together." I was speechless, my heart pounding. It felt like a dream, too good to be true. "Derek, this is so sudden." He squeezed my hand tighter, his smile softening. "When you know, and I know we're perfect together." The proposal was public, extravagant, and irresistible. My doubts drowned in the sea of his assurances. I said yes, and the rush of that moment made everything else fade away. The wedding was a monument to opulence. Every detail screamed perfection, from the delicate, hand-sewn lace on my dress to the lavish spread of food that seemed never-ending. Family and friends gathered under crystal chandeliers, watching as Derek and I exchanged vows that now felt like a lifetime away. In those moments, staring into his eyes, I believed in the future we built. Yet, not long after, the illusion began to crumble. Derek's charm started to wear off, revealing cracks in his golden persona. The man who once whispered sweet words of love and ambition now spoke with a sharp edge. "You're not trying hard enough," he snapped one evening when I expressed concerns about his latest business venture. "Do you even care about our success?" The cracks widened with each passing day, exposing rifts that words alone couldn't heal. The man who promised to elevate me had slowly begun the descent into a controlling tyrant. But at that point, it was too late to turn back. I glanced at the glittering city outside the window, remembering the hope and excitement that once filled me. Now it felt distant, almost unrecognizable. Nonetheless, a small spark remained inside, a reminder of my past dreams. Little did Derek know, this nightmare would soon turn to his. Life after the wedding was a blur of elaborate galas, high-stakes business meetings, and a ceaseless need to maintain appearances. Derek's charming facade began to slip away, revealing a colder, more controlling side. The man who once promised to conquer the world with me now seemed intent on conquering me. One evening, I was in the kitchen, trying to prepare dinner. Derek walked in, surveying the scene with his usual air of superiority. "That's what you're making, again?" His tone was dripping with disdain. I looked up, my hands trembling slightly. "Yes, Derek, you liked it last time." "Liked it?" he scoffed. "I tolerated it. You should know the difference by now." I bit my lip and turned back to the cutting board, my heart sinking. As I continued chopping, I could feel his eyes boring into me. He loved making me feel small, insignificant. "You never get it right, do you?" he snapped, knocking over a bowl of vegetables. "It shouldn't be this hard? Are you even trying?" His words stung, but I kept my head down. Any response would only fuel his anger. Days turned into weeks, and Derek's behavior worsened. He scrutinized everything I did, finding fault in even the smallest details. When I suggested we see a counselor, he laughed in my face. "Therapy? That's for weak people, Emma. We don't need some stranger meddling in our business." But deep down, I knew it wasn't our business. It was his. His control over every aspect of our life became more apparent with each passing day. One night, I decided to confront him. "Derek, we need to talk," I said as he walked in from yet another late night at the office. "About what?" he asked, not bothering to hide his irritation. "About us. About how things have changed." He threw his jacket onto a chair, loosening his tie. "Changed? How exactly?" "You're different. We're different. You're always angry, always criticizing me. This isn't what I signed up for." Derek's eyes darkened. "Maybe you need to change your expectations. Marriage isn't some fairy tale, Emma. It's work." "I know that," I countered, my voice wavering, "but it shouldn't be like this. We shouldn't be like this." He crossed the room in swift strides, stopping inches away from me. "Listen, and listen well. You don't get to decide how this marriage works. I do. You think you have any real say here? You're wrong." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "This isn't love, Derek," he sneered, his lips curling in contempt. Love is a concept for the naive and the weak. Grow up, Emma. Weeks later, concerned after hearing about Derek's temper during the holidays, my parents called. Sweetie, are you sure you're okay? Mom's voice held a note of worry. I'm fine, really, I lied, glancing over my shoulder to make sure Derek wasn't around. Just busy with life here. Emma, you know you can always come home, Dad added softly. I know, Dad, but this is my home now. My words felt hollow, even to my own ears. As Derek's control tightened, my resolve grew stronger. I began to see the man I loved for who he really was, a master manipulator consumed by his own ego. My initial efforts to fix our marriage became a desperate scramble for survival. Collecting bits of evidence on Derek's unethical business practices became my new focus. I started documenting everything, keeping detailed records of his deals and transactions. It was a small rebellion, a secret act of defiance. Each note, each email saved, was a step closer to my freedom. Every day was another opportunity to observe, to gather more clues about his crooked activities. If Derek was going to keep me in this golden cage, I would use it against him. This nightmare had to end, and I was determined to break free. Derek's financial downfall began slowly, like the rumble of a distant storm. At first, it was subtle. Muted phone calls, late nights at the office. But soon the cracks in his empire grew too large to ignore. Derek, why are these bills late? I asked one evening, shuffling through a stack of past-due notices. He glanced at me, irritation evident. It's nothing, just a temporary setback. A setback? I held up the red envelopes. This is a bit more than that. He snatched the papers from my hand. I said I have it under control. Don't you trust me? His words were laced with anger, but also a hint of desperation. I could see the strain in his eyes, the cracks in his confidence. Of course, I trust you, I lied, choosing my words carefully. I just worry sometimes. Worry about yourself, he snapped. I don't need you poking around in my business. But it was clear Derek was no longer the unstoppable force he once seemed. His businesses began to crumble, and he became increasingly erratic. One night, he came home, a shadow of the man I once knew. His clothes were rumpled, his face drawn. They're pulling out, he muttered to himself, pacing the room. Who is? I asked cautiously. My investors, he spat. Bunch of cowards. Derek, maybe there's something we can do. Maybe if we... Stop, he yelled, throwing a glass against the wall. Just stop. You wouldn't understand. This is bigger than you, bigger than us. I flinched at his outburst, but held my ground. We're in this together, remember? His eyes narrowed. Together? Now you care about together? You think you can help? You're just as useless here as you are everywhere else. His words cut deep, but they only strengthened my resolve. Derek wasn't just drowning, he was dragging me down with him. One evening, as Derek stumbled through another business call, a plan began to take shape. If I could gather enough evidence of his underhanded deals, I could tear down his empire and build a case against him. I started reaching out to people, old friends, former employees, anyone that might help me understand the depth of his deceit. Lydia Green? I said hesitantly into my phone. It had taken me weeks to get a hold of her. Yes, who is this? Her voice was guarded. Emma Larson. We met a few times when you worked for Derek. I need to talk to you about... everything. There was a pause. Why should I help you? Because I know he wronged you too, I said, my voice steady. And because you deserve to see him fall. Lydia hesitated, then sighed. Fine. Meet me at the coffee shop on 5th Street tomorrow at 2 p.m. When we met, Lydia was a wealth of information. Derek has been using company funds for his private ventures, she revealed, shaking her head. He's been hiding it from the board for years. Her eyes flashed with anger. He's ruined lives, Emma, but people are afraid to stand up to him. Not anymore, I said firmly. We gather the evidence, document everything. We bring him down together. The plan was formidable, but my resolve was unwavering. If Derek could manipulate his way to the top, I could surely expose the truth. The next step was to find more allies, people who would help me build the case against him. As I walked away from the meeting with Lydia, a sense of determination washed over me. Derek's empire, built on lies and manipulation, was about to crumble, and I would be the one to watch it fall. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Derek was ruthless, and I would need to be careful. But each step forward was a step toward my freedom, and no matter how tight Derek's grip, I was getting ready to break free. The fight had only just begun. The days that followed my meeting with Lydia were intense. Every moment alone was dedicated to piecing together Derek's downfall. I pored over documents, combed through emails, and spoke with more of his disgruntled employees. One name came up repeatedly: Jake Mathers, Derek's biggest competitor. Meeting Jake for the first time was daunting. We arranged to meet at a small, discreet cafe, neutral territory for both of us. As I walked in, he was already seated, sipping a coffee. He stood up when he saw me, offering a firm handshake. "Emma Larson," he said with a nod. "I've heard a lot about you." "Jake Mathers," I replied, squeezing his hand. "Thank you for meeting with me." He gestured for me to sit. "Let's get straight to it. Lydia mentioned you have some dirt on Derek." I nodded, opening my bag and pulling out a thick folder. "He's been cooking the books, funneling company funds into private ventures, among other things." Jake's eyes widened as he flipped through the evidence. "This is significant. Why are you doing this? I thought you were his loyal wife." I took a deep breath. I was once. But I can't ignore what he's become. He's controlling, manipulative, and he's hurt too many people, including me. Jake closed the folder and looked at me intently. "You want to take him down, and you need my help." "Exactly," I replied. "You have the business acumen and the resources. We can expose him together." "All right," Jake said after a moment, leaning back in his chair. "But know this, if we do this, there's no turning back." "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't ready," I asserted. Jake and I began meeting regularly, forming a strategy. We collected testimonies from former employees, built a case with forensic accountants, and crafted a plan that left no room for Derek to weasel out. Back at home, maintaining a facade of normalcy was painful. Derek's temper flared more frequently as his businesses crumbled. One night, he came home drunk and belligerent. "You think I don't know what you're up to?" he slurred, pointing a shaky finger at me. My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. "What are you talking about, Derek?" "Spending so much time out, meeting people. Don't think I haven't noticed." He staggered closer, his eyes bloodshot. "I know you're trying to betray me." I swallowed hard, staring down. "Stop being paranoid, Derek. I'm just trying to help." "Help?" He laughed darkly. "You can't even help yourself." His words were a cruel reminder of my supposed powerlessness, but I refused to let him see my fear. "Maybe, if you weren't so busy destroying everything, we wouldn't be in this mess." He grabbed my arm, his grip tight and painful. "Careful, Emma. You're treading dangerous waters." That night, I hid the folder with damning evidence in a secure place. It was a risk, having it so close, but it was also a reminder of my mission. I wouldn't let fear deter me. Derek's empire was shaky, and with Jake's help, it would soon crumble. The next morning, I met Lydia in a park, away from prying eyes. "How's the plan coming?" I asked as I handed her a coffee. She sipped gratefully and nodded. "Jake's all in. He's already leaked bits to the media. Derek's struggling to keep a lid on it." I felt a surge of satisfaction. Good. The more pressure, the better. "We need to be ready, though," Lydia warned. "Derek won't go down without a fight." "I'm ready," I said, my voice unwavering. As I walked away from the park that day, I knew we were close. Each step brought us nearer to the moment when Derek would finally face the consequences of his actions. The stakes were high and the danger real, but I was prepared to see it through. For too long, Derek had controlled my life. Now, it was time to reclaim it and watch him fall. The tension in the house was suffocating. Derek's paranoia reached new heights with each passing day. He was convinced that enemies surrounded him, but he never suspected the biggest threat was right under his nose. One evening, I received a text from Jake. "Ready for tomorrow?" I typed back quickly, "Yes." The plan was set in motion. Tomorrow, we would expose Derek at a critical board meeting. I just had to survive the night. Derek was at his desk, a scowl etched on his face. Papers were strewn about, and the air was thick with his frustration. "Damn it!" he shouted, slamming a file shut. I approached cautiously. "Anything I can help with?" He looked up, eyes burning with anger. "Unless you can make $500,000 appear out of thin air, no?" I stayed silent. Offering advice would only enrage him further. I retreated to the kitchen, my heart pounding with anticipation. The next morning, I dressed carefully, choosing a professional outfit that exuded confidence. I needed every ounce of strength for what lay ahead. Derek eyed me suspiciously as I grabbed my bag. "Why so dressed up?" he asked, his voice laced with skepticism. "Board meeting," I replied simply. I thought I'd look the part." He grunted, not entirely convinced, but too preoccupied to dig further. I left the house, trying to keep my breath steady. Jake met me in the lobby of Derek's company building. "You ready?" he asked, his face serious. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, my voice steady despite the nerves roiling inside me. We walked into the boardroom together. The room was filled with powerful men and women, all waiting for Derek. Moments later, Derek barged in, oozing his usual arrogance but with a hint of desperation lurking beneath. "All right, let's get started," he commanded, dropping into his seat at the head of the table. The meeting unfolded. Derek laid out his usual bravado, attempting to mask the deteriorating state of his empire. But the murmurs and discontent were barely concealed among the board members. Jake stood up, interrupting Derek. "Before we move forward, there's something critical we need to discuss." Derek's eyes narrowed. "And what would that be, Jake?" Jake glanced at me, then turned to the rest of the board. "Derek has been hiding significant financial discrepancies. We have concrete proof." Derek laughed, a hollow sound. "Dad, this is absurd. Just another attempt by a rival to discredit me." I stood up, my hands slightly trembling, but my voice firm. "It's not absurd, Derek. It's the truth, and we have the documents to prove it." I handed out copies of our evidence: false transactions, misappropriations, and unauthorized deals. The room erupted into chaos, voices shouting over each other. Derek's face went pale, then red with fury. "You traitorous bitch!" he screamed, lunging toward me. Two board members restrained him as I stepped back, my heart pounding in my chest. Jake raised his voice above the din. "The evidence speaks for itself. Derek has not only jeopardized this company, but also the livelihoods of everyone involved. It's time to vote on his removal." Derek struggled against the hands holding him back, his eyes filled with rage. "You think you can do this to me? You think you'll win?" The vote was swift and decisive. The board members, tired of Derek's tyranny, chose unanimously to oust him. As they escorted him out, his threats echoed through the hallway. "You haven't seen the last of me, Emma. I'll destroy you." But his words fell on deaf ears. I knew that this was just the beginning of his downfall. Jake approached me, a satisfied smile on his face. "You did it, Emma. We did it." I nodded, the weight of what we'd just accomplished settling in. "Thanks to you and everyone who believed in bringing him down." As I walked away from the building, a sense of liberation washed over me. Derek's empire was crumbling, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. The journey wasn't over. Derek would try to strike back, but I was ready. I had found my strength, and I wasn't going to let it go. The wind had shifted, and this time it was in my favor. The aftermath of Derek's ousting was a whirlwind. News spread quickly, and his once loyal supporters jumped ship. It was like watching a dam break. All the lies and manipulations he'd built over the years came crashing down. Derek didn't take it quietly. He stormed into our house that night, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "You think this is over?" he bellowed, slamming the door behind him. I stood my ground, calm but alert. "It is over, Derek. You've lost." He moved closer, his face twisted in anger. "You think you're tough now, huh? Think you can just ruin me and walk away?" "I'm not the one who ruined you," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "You did that to yourself." With a snarl, he grabbed my arm, yanking me toward him. "You don't know who you're messing with. I will destroy everything you have." I met his eyes, unflinching. "You already tried, and you failed. It's time to let go, Derek." His grip tightened painfully before he shoved me away. "You'll regret this," he hissed, storming out again. The following days were tense, as Derek tried to cling to the remnants of his power. But every attempt to salvage his reputation was met with resistance. The evidence we'd revealed was too damning, and the board refused to reinstate him. Legal actions were looming over him like a dark cloud. In the meantime, Jake and I worked tirelessly to ensure that the transition of power was smooth. We spent long hours at the office, reviewing contracts, meeting with stakeholders, and planning the company's future. "You did an incredible job," Jake said one night after a particularly grueling day. "Thanks," I replied, exhaustion evident in my voice. "It's been worth it, though." He smiled, his admiration clear. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Emma." Those words stuck with me as I navigated through the chaos. With Derek out of the way, I started to rebuild my life. I found a small apartment downtown and moved out of the mansion that once felt like a prison. Jake and Lydia became more than just allies, they were friends. Lydia was a constant source of support, and Jake's presence was a grounding force. One evening, as we wrapped up another meeting, Jake looked at me thoughtfully. "You should come by the new office," he offered. "See the changes we're making." "I'd like that," I agreed, feeling a sense of closure as I looked ahead. Derek's threats didn't disappear completely. He made a few desperate attempts to contact me, but I never responded. Legal proceedings took their toll on him, and he slowly faded from public view. His fall from grace was complete. In my new apartment, I began to plan my next steps. Freedom felt strange, yet exhilarating. I pursued business ventures that I had put on hold for years, reconnecting with my passions. One afternoon, while setting up my new home office, I received a message from an unknown number. The words were simple. "He's hit rock bottom." I stared at the screen, the finality of it sinking in. Derek was done. There was no satisfaction in his suffering, only a sense of finality. I chose not to reply, deleting the message instead. Reflecting on everything, I realized that revenge hadn't been my true goal. It was freedom, pure and simple, the power to live my life without fear and to pursue my dreams without restraint. I called my mother, eager to share the news. "Mom, it's over. Derek's done." There was a pause before her voice, filled with relief, responded. "I'm so proud of you, Emma. You've come such a long way." "I have," I agreed, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "And I'm just getting started." As I hung up, I looked around my new home, feeling a sense of peace. This was my space, my life, my future, and I was ready to embrace it with every ounce of strength I had found within myself. The fight was over, but the journey had just begun. Setting up my new business felt like planting a garden after a long winter. The seeds of my ideas, once dormant, were now bursting with potential. With the help of Jake and Lydia, I rented a small office space and began assembling a team. The air buzzed with excitement and purpose. One evening, I was settling into my new place when Jake dropped by. He handed me a bottle of champagne. "To new beginnings," he said, popping the cork. We clinked glasses, the bubbles sparkling in the dim light. "To new beginnings," I echoed, savoring the taste of freedom. Lydia came in, carrying a stack of papers. "We've got the final contracts for the new client," she announced. "This is huge, Emma." I looked over the documents, disbelief mingling with pride. "Unbelievable. We're really doing this." "Yes, we are," Jake said, his voice full of conviction. "You're driving this ship now. How does it feel?" "Terrifying and thrilling," I admitted, but in the best way possible. Our company launch was a modest event, held in the very office where I had planned Derek's downfall. It seemed fitting. Friends, clients, and family gathered, filling the space with laughter and chatter. Jake raised his glass. "Here's to Emma, for her courage and vision. May this venture be everything she's dreamed of and more." Cheers erupted, and I felt a tear slip down my cheek. "Thank you all for being here," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This wouldn't be possible without your support." After the event, I found a quiet moment on the terrace, looking out over the city that had once seemed so intimidating. Lydia joined me, a smile playing on her lips. "Thought you might need a breather," she said, leaning on the railing. "Yeah, it's a lot to take in," I confessed. "You did it, Emma. You faced your demons and came out stronger." "I couldn't have done it without you and Jake." "Speaking of Derek," she said, her tone shifting. "Did you hear? He's filed for bankruptcy." I nodded. "I saw the news. It's surreal." "Does it bother you?" she asked, eyes searching mine. "No," I replied slowly. "It doesn't. He made his choices, and now he's dealing with the consequences." Lydia's phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen. "Looks like Jake's causing a commotion inside again. I better go check on him." We shared a laugh as she went back inside. Alone again, I let the silence wash over me. I had come full circle, from a lost and controlled woman to someone who had regained power and purpose. A few days later, as I was going through some old boxes, I found a note from Derek. It was from the early days, filled with promises of forever. I read it one last time and then tore it up, letting the pieces fall into the trash. Just as I was about to leave the office that evening, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. I hesitated but answered it. "Emma?" The voice was weak, strained. "Yes, who is this?" "It's Derek." My heart skipped a beat. What do you want, Derek? I need help, he stammered. I have nowhere left to turn. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange mix of pity and resolve. Derek, I can't help you. You need to find a way to help yourself. There was a long pause. Please, Emma, just hear me out. I've heard enough, I said firmly. Goodbye, Derek. I hung up, feeling a sense of closure. The following day, I finalized plans for our new project, excitement bubbling within me. Jake and Lydia joined me in the office, their energy infectious. Ready to take over the world? Jake joked. Absolutely, I replied, confident and sure. As we gathered around the table to strategize, I knew this was just the beginning. I had faced my past and forged a future filled with promise. The unseen chains that once bound me were finally broken, and there was nothing holding me back anymore. The sun set behind the city skyline, casting a warm glow over our plans and dreams. Together, we were unstoppable, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free.